What's going on, backpackers? My name is Dave, and this channel is called Off Grid. I'm into all things backpacking, hiking, and gear. If you're into that sort of thing too, please think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Now, in one of my recent videos, I talked about what my favorite trail is, and I mentioned in that video that I was going to end up trying to start my own hashtag and my own chain to try and get that one going. Now, I'm not sure if this one officially ever got started or if it was one in the past, so if it was, I apologize if I haven't seen it. But the one that I want to try to start up is going to be, what is your least favorite backpacking trip? Now, even if this was a video in the past, maybe enough time has passed where we can start this one up again. But anyway, I want to know what you other backpacking YouTubers, and anybody else out there too, just general comments and followers and fans, I want to know what your worst backpacking trip is. So here's mine. Oddly enough, my worst backpacking trip, or ironically enough, I don't know, you probably expect it, but it is my very first backpacking trip, and my very first one was in 2020, so it was just last year. I planned it. I was going out with my buddy Raul, who you've seen in another video on my channel already, in a couple of videos actually. And I was like, all right, man, don't worry about it. I got this. I'll plan it out. You don't have to worry about it. I ended up bringing like an extra backpack for him. I brought a bunch of extra gear for us, and I was like, we're good. We're good. I picked a really good spot for it. We've got some amazing, ocean sweeping views and everything, and we're gonna have a fantastic time. Just don't worry about it. It's gonna be good. So, sure enough, he ends up going like, all right, how much food should I bring? How much water should I bring? And me being the pro at this point, right? No, I was a complete noob. I was a complete rookie. But thinking that I had enough knowledge at that point and watching hundreds of hours of YouTube videos, I was like, I got this. Don't worry about it, I got this. I told him everything that he needed. I told him everything that I had that I was gonna bring for him, and I was like, you're covered, we're good. I did a bunch of research on it, and I've got everything covered. Just don't worry about it. And man, I was like 100% wrong. We were so not ready for this trip. It was like unbelievable. And it was really just a backpacking weekend that we were going to do. It wasn't super far from either one of us. And it was at Crystal Cove is what they call it. It's right near Laguna Beach. And I was like, hey, what better spot to, plan my first backpacking trip than ocean sweeping views, right? But it all kind of went downhill from there. I should say uphill, because we ended up doing about 1,000 feet of elevation gain on the first night that we ended up going to, trying to get to our first campsite. So that in and of itself was kind of a drag. The second thing was the weather. So I'm going to break this down into like what exactly went wrong, and I think like the three biggest categories were the weather. The second one was the fact that it was way too buggy, and the third one was that I didn't have my sleep system dialed in. So you can imagine with all of those three things going wrong that you can have a pretty horrendous time out on the trail. And the fact that the elevation gains wasn't even in that top three kind of sets the scene for what we're kind of getting into as far as like how bad this trip really was. So again, yeah, like I think it was a little bit under 1,000 feet of elevation, maybe 800 something, mid 800s. On the first night, we both have, about like 20 pounds of gear on our back, and we started a little bit later in the day. This was right around, I think, like September, October in 2020, so we had a little bit extra daylight, but we started to, move towards that daylight savings of like losing that extra hour. So we were kind of pushing it towards the end of the day, had to bust out the headlamps to get there at camp, and, kind of like set up camp in the dark and had dinner in the dark. But the first night really wasn't that bad, but the first real big issue that I had mentioned was the weather, right? So the whole time it was forecasted to be about 81 degrees, 80 to 81 degrees. And I was thinking to myself, we were both kind of thinking like, that's not super bad, especially in Southern California. We have a decent amount of wind that usually kind of comes about, and we're thinking like, we're right on the coast, we got the Pacific, winds sweeping in, we'll be fine. If anything, we'll have to deal with the wind, right? Not really with the heat, but we were dead wrong. We ended up sweating our butts off the entire time that we were there. and the 80 degrees was kind of just like a hot box. Like there was no breeze that we were getting. I think possibly because we were going a little bit higher in elevation, maybe all of like the wind that was hitting the coast down below, and you know, we were like way up top, so maybe we weren't getting any of that amazing breeze, but there was like no wind the entire time we were there, so we were definitely sweating. The second issue with the heat was the fact that this particular trail and campsites, it's kind of a combination of both. You have mountain hikers, you have day hikers that kind of go on this trail. And then there are also, I think, like 3 to 4 different campsites. So I ended up booking 2 different campsites, and it was kind of like in a loop fashion. So I really like that about this particular trail too, is that we could stay at different campsites, go in a loop, and then kind of pack it out on the third day. But the heat really ended up killing us, and not only that, but there were no water sources at all on this trail, guys. So in true rookie mistake fashion, whatever you want to call it, we definitely did not pack enough water. We were guzzling water because it was, you know, hot enough the entire time, and because there was really little to no tree coverage the entire time that we were out there too. So we were just sweating buckets and just trying to regain all that hydration, not being able to fill up anywhere. There were no hoses, and there were no other water sources. At the second camp that we were at, there was a creek that looked like it ran kind of like behind the campsites, but it was like way past dried up. There was just nothing really around as far as hydration goes. The campsites were primitive. They did have pit toilets and they had picnic tables, but they didn't have any fire pits. And you know, it was just really hot, guys. It was really hot. So that was the first thing, was the fact that there was not any water sources, and then there was like no way for us to camel back up if we needed to. I think there were a couple of fountains, like water fountains at like the beginning of the trail, but like once you started hiking in, that was it. So not only that, but this weekend backpacking trip was trying to do 2 nights and 3 days, like I said, in that loop fashion, but because of the heat, it ended up being an epic fail. We had to bail out and basically leave in a matter of, I think it was even like under 24 hours. We made it like one night. We ended up making it to our second camp site and then like setting up camp and everything, and then we just basically like sat down and went like, you know what, like I don't think we have enough water to make it out of here to last like an extra day, because like I said, you know, it was hot, we were sweating, and we were just trying to like maintain our hydration levels. And Raul like mentioned it first, and I was like, you know what, you're right. I think I only ended up packing like somewhere around like 3 to 4 liters, and it just wasn't enough water to make it the entire time. I was also packing like freeze-dried meals, so you needed to boil water to hydrate those too, and hot meals and hot weather doesn't really go together either, so it was just not a good combination for success the first time out. So the second biggest issue that we ran into was going to be the bugs. It was a super buggy situation out there, and we were not prepared for it. We were not ready for it. So I had 2 different types of bug spray, believe it or not. I ended up carrying Picardin, as well as I don't know if it was, I think it was some other like blend. It wasn't deep, but it was some other kind, and it did like little to nothing to try and combat these bugs, because we were dealing with gnats and ants mostly. So gnats, if you've never dealt with them before, like bug spray does absolutely nothing against these guys. They fly around your face, they try to get into your eyes and your ear, and they constantly like are attacking your face. There's one super simple thing that you can purchase that can deal with that, and that is this right here, a simple bug head net, and I didn't have one. Neither of us had one. Basically just looks like a big stocking that you put over your face, but if we had that, that definitely would have helped out hugely against combating that one particular type of bug. Now the other bug were the ants. So we had picnic benches that we could use. There were no campfire rings, and I think there was like maybe like 1 pit toilet at each campsite. But the picnic benches are basically just like a buffet for all the ants, because anybody who hikes in and camps at these sites end up leaving food around, so they know exactly where to go to pick up some free food. So naturally you're going to want to use a picnic bench if it's there, but they were like just covered all over. And I'm not talking about like a super swarm, but enough to really like be a nuisance and a problem. So in hindsight, again, hindsight's always 20/20. I probably should have taken my bug spray and just like sprayed down the table to try and deal with some of those, but we didn't end up doing that, and that was just another like bug that we had to deal with. The other problem with the ants was just dealing with them, not necessarily in the tent, but like kind of just around the campsites. They were just kind of like all around, and they weren't huge. They were just like really tiny ants. But another thing that I wish that I had was this. And you can see I haven't even opened it yet. I still have the spray bottle around it. But this is permethrin for your tent. So I didn't end up spraying the tent that I brought down with this permethrin. It really would have helped out to keep those, you know, bugs just around the tent out of the tent too. So the second biggest issue were the bugs, but the biggest problem is definitely those gnats just getting in our faces. When we had to leave, my buddy Raul was like, dude, I kept waking up like having like nightmares about it. Even though we were there for only a short period of time, I was like, man, I saw the same thing. It's like a form of torture that even when we closed our eyes, we could still see the gnats like attacking our faces. So it was not that great of an experience having gnats all up in your face, that's for sure. And that pretty much does it with the bug issue. Like I said, permethrin and a bug head net, we would have had no issues with the bugs whatsoever. With the heat issue, there's nothing that we really could have done about that except like bring a ton of water with us. There was nobody else that we could really like borrow water from, and like I said, there were no other water sources to either filter from or hose or anything. So the biggest thing with that was just like being able to bring in enough water in just like water weight that we can consume and just stay hydrated. So those are the two biggest issues. And then the third one was almost entirely on me, and that was my sleep system. I still didn't have that super dialed in. I think it's still, even like to this day, I'm still kind of like tweaking and trying to find the ultimate comfortable setup for myself. But I ended up bringing a Trekology pad as well as the Nemo pillow, and it just was like sleeping on a rock for me. I really don't like air chambers in general. I realize that there are very few options for you to choose from if you don't go with an air pad and you're sleeping in a tent. So I really kind of just have to deal with it, and I've made sort of adjustments here and there, and had a lot of different pads that I've tried out since then. But that particular night that we were out there, it was just like super uncomfortable. I was tossing and turning all night. The Trekology pad wasn't wide enough. I felt like I was going to fall off of it. The Nemo pillow, even though it has that thin layer of foam on top, also has an air chamber in it, and like putting my head on it, sort of like putting your head on a curb at night. It was just too stiff. It was too rough of an experience, and I ended up waking up multiple times throughout the night, tossing and turning, and actually waking up Raul, who was in the tent next to me. He heard me basically like rustling all night because the pad is kind of crinkly too, so we both didn't really have that great of a night's sleep. So now to the epic fail of a conclusion. The epic fail for this trip was the fact that it was so hot that we ended up having to bail after less than 24 hours of being out there. We wanted to end up doing 2 nights and 3 days, and like I said, we made it less than 24 hours because we ended up getting to our second campsite on the second day. We made it there by before noon, and we sat down in our tents to get away from the gnats that were constantly bugging us in our face, and we were just sitting there going like talking to each other through the tents, through the mesh, and going like, do we have enough water? And Raul like turns to me and he goes like, I don't think we have enough water to get out of here if we were to stay the extra day. And I was sitting there going, I was trying to like deny it the whole time. I was sitting there in my mind going like, no, we can make it, we can push through. And we had to make the tough decision to basically bail on my very first backpacking trip and just get the hell out of there, because it was getting almost dangerous at that point. We were definitely dehydrated. Like I said, we were chugging water like crazy, and we just made the tough decision to pack it out. So while the mileage wasn't super high, it was was only about anywhere from like 2.5 to 3.5 at each step. So like 2.5 to 3.5 to get to the first camp, then on the second day to get to the second camp, and then another 2.5 to 3.5 to get out. So roughly around 10 miles total. But on the second day, we just decided to do the back like 6 or 7 miles just to get out and pack it out, because it was just getting a little bit too dangerous for us to stay. So water is super, super important. I can't stress that enough. You definitely have to have enough water and hydrate while you're out on the trail. It's not only important to have enough food and to be able to sleep comfortably, but you also have to have enough water to stay hydrated. Otherwise, it can get pretty dangerous out there. So, like I said, we decided to cut bait and pack it out. It really stinks. This is something that like I didn't really want to publish, but I just wanted to be completely honest with you guys and just say like nobody's perfect. Everybody's still learning. I'm still learning, and you know, I definitely learned a lot from this trip. If, like I said, like the few minor tweaks that you could have done here and there, you know, from bug spray to the bug head net to, you know, water, just packing in more water, like all those things like kind of had to happen in order for it to be a successful trip. And you know, with all the research that I put in, I was like, man, I can't believe that we had to bail. I really didn't want to, but we had to. We had to just get out of there. And it really stinks that it was my first trip out, but oddly enough, it did not deter me from wanting to get back out there very quickly. So that's it for my, you know, worst backpacking experience. I want to know what you guys have to say about your worst backpacking experience. Let me know down in the comments below. I'm also going to tag Dan over at Backpacking Adventures to try and get this chain rolling and see if other YouTubers can pick up this idea and run with it. I want to hear all about it. Let me know why your backpacking experience went so horribly wrong. I don't mean to laugh, I don't mean to smile, but it's kind of like, you know, you end up learning a lot from your mistakes, and this was definitely a pretty big mistake, but still a good time. We ended up having a good time when we were out there. So that's it for this week, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please think about subscribing. If you liked what you saw today, please give me the thumbs up. And if you're headed off grid, make sure you do your research. Always do your research. Do your research, guys, and make it a safe one. Until next time, guys, I'll see you on the next one.